Alright, in this video we're going to continue looking at midpoints. In a previous video we looked at how to find a midpoint, and now we're going to look at an example where we actually know the midpoint. So you can see here in this example, which we're going to get to in a minute, we know what the midpoint is, but we don't know what the other endpoint is. So we'll work on that. Before we get to that, let's flash back to how do you calculate a midpoint of a line segment. Well, the midpoint, if you recall, is the average of the x values, so x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and the average of the y values, so y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And since this is a coordinate, we want to make sure we put it in parentheses. Without the parentheses, the notation is not correct. Alright, so let's go ahead and look at how to calculate the endpoint of a line segment given the coordinates of one endpoint and the midpoint. So we know the endpoint here is 9, negative 1. And we know the midpoint, so we want to find the other endpoint. So we don't know what this endpoint is, so let's let it be x comma y, because we don't know those values, but we do know that it's going to be an endpoint. So I'm going to show you two different ways to do this. Let's start out algebraically. So I know that if I find the average of these two values, the average of this x value and the average of that value should give us 8. So I have negative 9 plus x divided by 2. Since there's 2 points, we're going to add the x's and divide by 2. And we know that has to be 8. And the way that I like to solve this is with cross multiplication. So I'm going to put this over 1. So I have a fraction on both sides, and then I'm going to multiply this way. So 1 times negative 9x plus 1. So 1 times anything is just whatever you're multiplying by. So negative 9 plus x, and then equals, and I'm going to multiply 2 times 8, so that's 16. And we're going to use our inverse operation, so I'm going to add 9 to both sides, and those cancel out, and I get that x is equal to 25. So now I've got the x coordinate of my other endpoint is going to be 25, and we're going to go ahead and figure out what the y coordinate is. Okay, so I know that the average of this negative 1 and the average of this y have to be 14. So let's go ahead and set up another equation. So I've got negative 1 plus y divided by 2. The average of those has to be 14. Again, I'm going to make this a fraction. There's other ways you could solve this. I just like to use cross multiplying. So again, 1 times that stuff in the upper left is just going to be negative 1 plus y. And then 2 times 14 is 28. And again, using our inverse operations, we'll add 1 to both sides. Those cancel out, and I'm left with y is equal to 29. So my y coordinate is 29. So the other endpoint is 25, 29. Alright, so another way that we could think about this is on a coordinate grid. And this sometimes is a little bit harder if the numbers are large, but if the numbers are smaller, it works out pretty well. So let's graph these 2 points. So I have one endpoint at negative 9, 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We'll try and make those as equal as possible. Negative 1. So here's 9, negative 1, negative 9, negative 1. And then the midpoint is at 8, 14. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we have to go at 14. Again, we're just kind of approximating. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. All right, so somewhere about here. Just a rough estimate, and that's going to be 8, 14. So this is our midpoint up here. And we'll call this point A. And then what we've got to do is we've got to find point B somewhere. So I know that however far I go this way and this way to get up there, to get the other point, I'm going to have to go the same distance over this way and up this way. So to go from -9 to +8, so I went 9 back to 0 and then another 8, so I know that's going to be plus 17 units. And then I went from -1 to +14, so I'm going to go 1 up to 0 and then another 14, so I'm going to go up 15. So now I know to get to the next point over here, this point over here, we'll just call that B. We'll figure out what those are. I'm going to have to go plus 17 to the right, so 8 and then another 17. That's going to give me 25. And then I'm going to have to go up 15 again for the y coordinate. So I was at 14 and I'm going to go up another 15, and that gives me 29. So this is more of a visual representation of it. So now I can see how accurate my drawing was. If I make a segment here, here's my midpoint. These two pieces, this piece and this piece, are going to be congruent. They're going to be equal because from A we went over 17 and up 15, and then from the midpoint over 17 and up 15 again. Alright, so two different ways to do it. Hopefully that gives you a better understanding. Go ahead and finish up the other examples there, and make sure you get help when you need it, and we'll see you next time.